So another cool texture in the song is these are actual guitars. It's like kind of like with my approach of like using plugins, like with the organ plugin, I added a few things to make it sound not just like a stock thing. Same approach, like if I'm recording guitars, I love to do things where it's not necessarily a guitar. Like this, if you were just to hear the sound, I'm thinking most people would think it was a keyboard. When I'm making these pad sounds, it typically doesn't really matter what kind of guitar that I'm using. I mean, right now I'm using a White Falcon. I did this song a couple years ago, so I can't remember exactly what guitar I was using, but these type of sounds aren't really specific to the guitar. It's more about the effects. So the main way that I generate the pad sounds is I use this Line 6 pedal. It's a delay pedal that a lot of people use for looping and things like that, but it has this really cool auto swell function. So I'm just playing a regular, kind of 2-note chord here by putting on the auto swell. And these are, kind of sounds that I've tweaked. These pedals have so many cool options. They're just so fun to play with. And then I think on this sound I also use the Pog, which like gives us an octave thing going. And just tons of reverb. I'd like to use the old Boss reverb. It's kind of probably one of the shittiest sounding reverbs, but that's personally why I like it. So that gives us these pad sounds. Can build like really cool, so I use this a lot. Like if you listen to a lot of my productions, you'll probably hear kind of weird ambient stuff. Like even, if you put distortion on it, you can get kind of cool sounds. So that in this track sounds like this. So it's almost kind of like an eerie texture, but it's just, for me, I'm always chasing sounds that aren't necessarily something you could just turn on, like as a preset in your laptop or something like that. Those can be cool sometimes as well, but just something different. And for this particular section of the song, in the bridge, I'll mute the vocals for a second. You just kind of hear as they come in. So, if we were to crank them, this is what they're doing.